I am 32 years old, and I am a woman trapped inside my own body. That is the simplest way to explain it. My mind works. I can think, I can feel, I can remember everything. But my limbs are stone. My eyelids are lead weights. My voice is a ghost in a machine that has been shut down. The doctors call it locked-in syndrome. They come into my room and talk about me as if I am a piece of furniture. They use words like vegetative and unresponsive. They shine lights in my eyes and see nothing, but I see them. I see the pity on their faces. I see the hopelessness. The worst part is the hearing. I hear everything. The beeping of the machines that are keeping me alive. The squeak of the nurse's shoes on the linoleum floor. The hushed, sad conversations of my family in the hallway. And today, I heard the two people I trusted most in the world discuss my death. My sister Sarah was standing by my bedside. Her hand was not on mine. It was clutching her purse strap. My husband, Mark, stood near the window, looking out at the gray city skyline. He had not looked at me, not really looked at me, in days. He looked at the charts. He looked at the monitors. He looked at his phone. "It has been 3 weeks, Mark," Sarah said. Her voice was strained, but not with grief. It was strained with impatience. I knew her tones better than anyone. This was her, "I want something and I am not getting it fast enough" voice. "I know how long it has been," Mark said, his back still to the room. "The doctors are not giving us any hope," she continued, taking a step closer to him. "They said she is not in there, that the person we knew is gone." That was a lie. Dr. Evans had been clear. He had said the chances were small but not zero. He had said recovery was rare but not impossible. He had told them we needed to give it time. Sarah was twisting his words, shaping them into a weapon. My heart, a muscle still thankfully under its own command, hammered against my ribs. I wanted to scream. "I am here. I am right here. Listen to me. We have to think about what she would want," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Clara was never one for being a burden. She was practical. She would hate this. All these machines, all this fuss. Mark finally turned from the window. His face was tired and pale. There were dark circles under his eyes. I wanted to feel pity for him, but a cold dread was creeping up my spine, choking out everything else. "What are you saying, Sarah?" he asked, though I could tell he knew exactly what she was saying. Sarah took a deep breath. She glanced at me, her eyes empty of any sisterly affection. It was a glance you would give a problem you needed to solve. Then she looked back at Mark, her expression hardening with resolve. "Pull the plug," she said. The words were quiet, but they landed in the silent room like a physical blow. It is what she would want. I lay there, a prisoner in my own skull, and listened. I waited for Mark to explode. I waited for him to throw her out of the room, to defend me, to shout that we would never give up hope. I waited for the husband I loved, the man who had vowed to stand by me in sickness and in health, to honor that promise. He did not. Mark was silent for a long time. The only sound was the rhythmic puff and hiss of the ventilator. He walked over to the bed and finally looked down at my face. His expression was unreadable. It was not grief. It was not love. It was something else, something calculating. "The doctor said it would be a process," he said softly, his voice raspy. "There are forms to sign. A committee has to approve it." My world tilted. He was not rejecting the idea. He was asking about the logistics. He was inquiring about the paperwork required to end my life. My sister had handed him the dagger, and he was checking to see if it was sharp enough. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, that it was almost silent. There was no internal scream. Just a cold, vast emptiness where my love for him used to be. I am here. The thought was no longer a plea. It was a promise. I am here, and I will not let you do this. Sarah moved to stand beside him. She placed a hand on his arm. It was a gesture of comfort, but it looked proprietary. It looked possessive. "We can handle that," she said. "We can do it together." Together. The word hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. I had always noticed how close they were, but I had brushed it off. I had told myself it was nice that my husband and my sister got along so well. I had been a fool, a blind, trusting fool. Now I saw it all with horrifying clarity. The late-night texts Mark would get that he said were from work. The way Sarah would light up whenever he entered a room. The private jokes between them that I was never a part of. It was all there, right in front of me, and I had refused to see it. "Okay," Mark said. Just that one word. "Okay." He did not cry. He did not look heartbroken. He just nodded, as if they had just agreed on where to go for dinner. In that moment, lying on that sterile hospital bed, unable to move a single muscle, I made a vow. I would not die. I would fight my way out of this prison of flesh and bone. And when I did, I would make them pay for this. I would make them pay for every whispered word, for every shared glance, for every single beat of my betrayed heart. My revenge would not be loud or flashy. It would be quiet, and it would be absolute. They thought I was gone. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The days that followed were a special kind of torment. Sarah and Mark became a team, united in their quiet, ghoulish task. They met with doctors and hospital administrators. They spoke in hushed, serious tones about my final wishes. I had a living will, something we had all drawn up years ago after my father got sick. It stated that I did not want to be kept alive by extraordinary measures if there was no reasonable hope of recovery. They clung to that phrase, no reasonable hope, twisting it to fit their narrative. "Dr. Evans, you yourself said the prognosis was grim," I heard Mark say to my neurologist one afternoon. They were standing just outside my door, but the door was ajar. They had become careless, confident in my unresponsiveness. "I said it was challenging, Mark." Dr. Evans corrected him gently. "Recovery from this type of brainstem injury is rare, but I have seen it happen. We are not at a point where I would use the word hopeless. But it is not reasonable to expect a recovery, is it?" Sarah chimed in, her voice slick with false sorrow. "We are thinking of her dignity. Clara was so full of life. She would never want to be like this." I wanted to move, to make a sound, to do anything to alert Dr. Evans to the truth. I concentrated all my will on my right index finger. Move. Just twitch. Nothing. It was like shouting into a vacuum. My commands left my brain and simply vanished. The frustration was a physical thing, a hot pressure behind my eyes. "The decision is ultimately up to you as her next of kin and medical proxy," Dr. Evans said, his voice laced with a professional weariness. "But I urge you to give it more time. We are still running tests. We are trying new treatments." "We appreciate that, doctor," Mark said smoothly. "And we will take your advice under consideration. We just want to be prepared." Prepared. They were preparing for my death like it was a business merger. After the doctor left, they came back into my room. Sarah was scrolling through her phone. "My friend Jenna is a lawyer," she said, not looking up. "She said we need to get a copy of the life insurance policy." "I have it in the safe at home," Mark replied. He was straightening the blanket over my legs. His touch was cold and impersonal. It made my skin crawl. "It is a substantial amount. 2 million. 2 million, Sarah repeated, a soft whistle escaping her lips. "That would be enough. We could finally get out of this city. Buy that little house on the coast we talked about." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Mark said, but there was no conviction in his voice. There was excitement. "First, we have to handle this." This was me. I was a problem to be handled. An obstacle between them and their new life. I listened as they planned their future over my paralyzed body. They talked about selling our house. They talked about quitting their jobs. They talked about traveling. They talked about a life together. A life built on my grave. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. My friend Chloe came to visit that evening. The moment she walked in, the atmosphere in the room changed. Chloe was my opposite in many ways. She was loud, fiercely loyal, and had a built-in detector for nonsense. "Hey, sweetie," she said, her voice soft as she approached my bed. She took my hand, her warm fingers wrapping around my cold ones. "I am here. Just wanted to sit with you for a bit." Mark and Sarah, who had been whispering by the window, fell silent. "Hello, Chloe," Mark said, his tone guarded. "Mark, Sarah." Chloe acknowledged them with a curt nod. She pulled a chair up close to my bed and started talking to me. She did not talk about how sad it was. She talked about normal things. She told me about a ridiculous customer at her coffee shop. She complained about her landlord. She read me headlines from a gossip magazine. She treated me like I was still me. "That new intern at work is a disaster," she said, chuckling. He tried to microwave a burrito still in the foil wrapper. The whole office smelled like burnt metal for hours. I felt a ghost of a smile on my lips. I could picture it perfectly. For a few minutes, I was not a patient. I was just Clara, listening to my best friend tell me a funny story. Sarah could not stand it. After about 10 minutes, she cleared her throat. "Chloe, the doctors say she cannot hear us." "The doctors do not know everything," Chloe shot back without looking away from me. "I am going to talk to my friend, whether she can hear me or not. It is what you do for people you love." The barb hit its mark. I saw Mark flinch. Sarah's lips tightened into a thin line. "We are just trying to be realistic," Mark said defensively. "Realism is fine," Chloe said, finally turning to look at them. Her eyes were sharp. "Giving up is not. I am not giving up on her." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I wanted to thank her. I wanted to tell her she was right, that I was here, that they were the ones who were wrong. I squeezed her hand with all my might, or at least I tried to. In my mind, my fingers curled around hers. In reality, nothing happened. "Well, we have some things to take care of," Sarah said, grabbing her purse. "Some hospital paperwork." "I will stay," Chloe said. It was not a question. It was a statement. They left, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a sliver of hope. I was not alone in this fight. I had an ally. Chloe stayed for another hour, holding my hand and talking to me. Before she left, she leaned in close. "Clara, if you are in there, just know I am on your side," she whispered. "Something feels wrong about this, about them. I do not trust them, so you just focus on getting better. I will watch your back." Tears I could not shed burned behind my eyes. She knew. She did not know the details, but her instincts were telling her that something was deeply, terribly wrong. That was the first crack in Sarah and Mark's plan, and I was going to do everything in my power to make it bigger. The next morning, a new nurse came on duty. Her name was Maria. She had a kind face and gentle hands. While she was checking my vitals, she spoke to me in a low, soothing voice. "Good morning, Clara. My name is Maria. I will be taking care of you today," she said. "You are in good hands." She did not treat me like an object. She told me what she was doing before she did it. "I am just going to check your blood pressure now. This might feel a little cold. I am just adjusting your pillow." When Mark and Sarah arrived, Maria was in the middle of giving me a sponge bath. They stood awkwardly in the doorway. "We can come back," Mark said. "It is all right," Maria said cheerfully. "I am almost done. You must be her husband." "I am," Mark said. "And this is her sister, Sarah." "It is nice to meet you both," Maria said. "She is a strong woman, I can tell." Sarah let out a small, bitter laugh. "She was," she said. Maria stopped what she was doing and looked at Sarah. It was a brief look, but it was pointed. "She is," Maria corrected her. "She is strong." I loved Maria in that moment. She was another person who saw me in the present tense. Later that day, after Mark and Sarah had left to have another one of their meetings, Maria came back into my room to check my IV drip. The room was quiet. "You know," she said as she fiddled with the tube, "I once had a patient like you. Everyone had given up on him. His family was ready to let him go, but his wife refused. She sat by his bed every single day and she read to him. She told him he had to fight." She paused and looked at me. One day he blinked. Just once. It was so small almost nobody saw it. But his wife did, and that was the beginning. He made a full recovery. She patted my arm. "The mind is a powerful thing, Clara. Do not ever let anyone tell you what you are capable of." Her story lit a fire in me. A blink. It was so small. So simple. Maybe I could not move my finger, but an eyelid? It was a smaller muscle. It felt more possible. From that moment on, I had a new focus. I stopped wasting energy trying to move my hands or feet. I directed all my concentration, every ounce of my will, to my right eyelid. I lay there for hours, the world a muffled hum around me, and I focused on one single command. Blink. I pictured the muscle. I remembered the feeling of blinking. The soft brush of my lashes against my lower lid. I tried to summon the sensation. Nothing. I tried again. And again. For hours. It was exhausting, this mental work. It was harder than any physical workout I had ever done. That night, I had a nightmare. I was at the bottom of a deep, dark ocean. I could see the sunlight shimmering on the surface, so far above me. I was trying to swim up, but my limbs were tangled in thick, heavy seaweed. Sarah and Mark were in a boat on the surface, looking down at me. They were not trying to help. They were smiling. Mark dropped an anchor, and it came hurtling down towards me. I tried to scream, but the water filled my mouth. I woke up, or rather, I surfaced from the nightmare back into the silent prison of my body. My heart was pounding. The fear was real. The anchor was real. They were going to kill me if I did not do something. Blink. I focused on my right eyelid with a new, desperate urgency. I poured all my fear, all my anger, all my will to live into that one tiny muscle. Blink. And then I felt it. A flicker. It was so faint I thought I might have imagined it. A tiny, infinitesimal twitch in my right eyelid. It was not a full blink. Not even close. But it was something. It was a signal. It was a start. Hope, fierce and sharp, surged through me. It was possible. I could do this. I had a weapon now. A very small weapon, but a weapon nonetheless. And I knew exactly when I was going to use it. I would wait for Chloe. I would wait for my ally. I would not waste my first shot on the enemy. They would not see it coming. They would continue their plotting, secure in their belief that I was gone. And I would lie here, silent and still, and practice my blinking. I would become an expert. And when the time was right, I would blink my way back to the world. The next 2 days were a blur of focused effort. Every waking moment that I was alone, I practiced. Blink, blink, blink. The twitch in my right eyelid became more pronounced. I could now make it happen on command. It was still small, a flutter more than a blink, but it was definite. I could feel the muscle contract. I had control over one tiny part of my body again. It was the most triumphant feeling I had ever known. Mark and Sarah continued their morbid dance. They brought in papers for Mark to sign. They spoke to a grief counselor who kept telling them they were doing the right thing and honoring her memory. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. They were mourning a person who was listening to every word. The committee meets on Friday. Mark told Sarah on Wednesday afternoon. They will review the file and our request. The lawyer, Jenna, said it is usually just a formality, especially with a living will in place. Friday. I had 2 days. My stomach, if I could have felt it, would have been in knots. 2 days to perfect my signal and wait for the right moment. Chloe was a godsend. She came every evening, a whirlwind of defiant optimism. She ignored Mark and Sarah's heavy sighs and pointed looks. She would pull her chair right up to my ear and whisper, "I did some digging, Clara," she whispered on Wednesday night after my husband and sister had conveniently left to get some air. "Something is not right with their story about your accident." My ears perked up. I focused on her voice. "They said you lost control on that winding road by the old quarry," she continued. "But I called the tow truck company that hauled your car. I pretended I was from the insurance company. The driver told me something weird. He said your brake line looked like it had been cut. Cleanly. Not frayed or rusted through. Cut." A cold shock went through me. I had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed was different. This was not just passive negligence. This was active, premeditated murder. He said he mentioned it to the police officer at the scene, but Mark was there, and he was so distraught, saying you were a bad driver and had been complaining about the brakes for weeks. He made it sound like it was your fault. The lies. They were so layered, so thorough. They had a story for everything. They had planned this down to the last detail. "I do not know what is going on, Clara," Chloe said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I am scared. This is darker than I thought. I am going to talk to a lawyer myself. Not your sister's friend. Someone else." I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to scream, "Yes, you are right. They are trying to kill me. They cut my brakes." But I could not. All I had was my tiny flicker. It was not time yet. I needed a better audience. I needed a doctor in the room. Thursday arrived. It was the day before the committee meeting. The day before my fate would be decided by a group of strangers who were being fed a pack of lies. My anxiety was a high-pitched whine in my head. I had to do something today. Mark and Sarah were in the room all morning, being the perfect grieving family for the benefit of the hospital staff. They were subdued and sorrowful. The moment a nurse left the room, their faces would change. "Did you transfer the money from the joint account?" Sarah asked Mark in a low voice. "I did it this morning," he said. "Moved most of it into my personal account. Just in case they freeze her assets after, you know. They were already looting me. The ghouls." I focused on my eyelid. Blink, blink, blink. I practiced. Keeping the movement small, saving my energy. Around noon, Dr. Evans came in to do his rounds. Maria, the kind nurse, was with him. This was my chance. Mark and Sarah were there, standing near the foot of my bed. It was the perfect audience. A doctor, a nurse, and my two would-be murderers. "Good afternoon, Clara," Dr. Evans said, shining the little light in my eyes as usual. No change in pupillary response. He turned to Mark. "The committee is scheduled for tomorrow morning. They have all the paperwork. I have submitted my medical evaluation. As I told you, while I do not see signs of cognitive function, these cases can be unpredictable." "We understand, doctor," Mark said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "This is the hardest decision of our lives, but we know it is what she would want." Now, it was time. As Dr. Evans turned to make a note on my chart, I did it. I focused all my will, all my rage, all my hope, and I blinked. Not the tiny flutter I had been practicing. I squeezed the muscle as hard as I could. A full, deliberate, unmistakable blink of my right eye. Maria saw it. "Doctor?" she gasped. "Doctor, look." She blinked. Everyone froze. Dr. Evans spun around. Mark and Sarah stared at me, their faces a mixture of confusion and panic. "What?" Dr. Evans said, stepping closer. "Are you sure?" "I saw it," Maria insisted. "Her right eye?" She blinked. Dr. Evans leaned over me, his face close to mine. "Clara, can you hear me? If you can hear me, blink your right eye again." The world seemed to hold its breath. Mark's face was ashen. Sarah looked like she was going to be sick. I gathered all my strength. I focused. Blink. It was another clear, undeniable movement. A stunned silence filled the room. Dr. Evans straightened up, his eyes wide. He looked from me to Mark and Sarah, then back to me. "My God," he whispered. "She is responsive." Mark stumbled backward, bumping into a chair. "No," he stammered. "It must be a reflex, a muscle spasm." "That was not a muscle spasm," Maria said firmly. "That was a deliberate blink. I saw it twice." "Let's test it," Dr. Evans said, his voice now sharp and focused. The pity was gone, replaced by a surge of clinical excitement. "Clara, I am going to ask you some simple questions. If the answer is yes, blink once. If the answer is no, do nothing. Do you understand? Blink." The sound of Sarah's sharp intake of breath was loud in the silent room. "Okay," Dr. Evans said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Okay, Clara, welcome back. Let's start with something simple. Is your name Clara?" Blink. "Are you in pain right now?" I thought for a second. I was not in physical pain. My pain was emotional. So I did nothing. "Okay, no pain. That is good," the doctor said. He was thinking. "Let's try something else. Clara, are you afraid?" This was it, the moment of truth. I looked past the doctor, my unmoving eyes fixing on the pale, terrified faces of my husband and my sister. Blink. The single blink was an accusation. It was a scream. It was the beginning of their end. Dr. Evans saw where I was looking. He followed my gaze to Mark and Sarah. A flicker of understanding, or perhaps suspicion, crossed his face. He became very still. "Clara," he said, his voice low and serious now. "Is there someone in this room you're afraid of?" The air was electric. Mark looked like a cornered animal. Sarah was visibly trembling, her hand clutching her throat. They knew what was coming. They knew I had them. I held their gaze. I let the moment stretch, letting them marinate in their terror. Then, slowly, deliberately, I blinked once. Yes. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a world breaking, the sound of lies shattering, the sound of justice beginning to stir. Mark was the first to break. "This is ridiculous," he blurted out, his voice high and strained. She cannot. It is the machines. It is a faulty signal." "It is not a faulty signal, Mr. Miller," Dr. Evans said, his tone icy. He did not take his eyes off me. "I have seen 3 clear, responsive blinks to direct questions. Your wife is conscious. She is communicating." He turned his full attention back to me, effectively dismissing my husband. His next question was careful, precise. "Clara, I need you to be very brave. Is the person you are afraid of your husband, Mark?" This was the point of no return. I could feel Sarah's hateful glare burning into me. I could feel Mark's panic radiating across the room. They were willing me to stop, to let this go, to die quietly as planned. But I was done being quiet. Blink. A choked sob escaped Sarah's lips. Mark just stood there, his mouth hanging open, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. He looked at me, truly looked at me for the first time in weeks. And in my still, silent face, he saw his own ruin. "And what about your sister, Sarah?" Dr. Evans pressed, his voice relentless. "Are you also afraid of her?" Blink. "Okay," Dr. Evans said softly. He straightened up and turned to Maria. "Maria, please call hospital security. Now." Then he turned to Mark and Sarah. His voice was cold steel. "I think it would be best if you both waited outside. In fact, I insist." "You cannot be serious," Sarah snapped, finding her voice. It was shrill. "This is a misunderstanding. She is confused. The drugs—" "She does not appear confused to me." Dr. Evans cut her off. "She has answered every question logically. Now please leave the room." Mark, looking completely defeated, grabbed Sarah's arm. "Let's go," he mumbled, pulling her towards the door. She resisted for a moment, her eyes locked on me, filled with a venom so pure it was almost visible. If looks could kill, I would have been dead 1,000 times over. But they could not. And I was very much alive. They left, and the door clicked shut behind them, leaving me alone with my doctor and my nurse, the two people who had just saved my life. "Clara," Dr. Evans said, his voice gentle again. "You are safe now. We are going to figure this out. I am canceling the committee meeting, obviously. We are changing your status to fully responsive." He looked at Maria. "And nobody gets into this room without my express permission. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, doctor," Maria said, her voice filled with a fierce protectiveness. He turned back to me. "There is more to this. Is not there, Clara? It is not just that you are afraid of them. They did something to you, did not they?" I could not tell him about the breaks. Not yet. It was too complex for a yes or no, but I could confirm his suspicion. "Blink." "I thought so," he said grimly. "Don't you worry. We will get you a way to communicate more fully. An alphabet board? A computer with retinal tracking. Whatever it takes. We are going to hear your story." Tears, real tears this time, finally welled up and spilled over, tracing hot paths down my temples into my hair. They were not tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of pure, unadulterated relief. The first battle was over. I had won. I had broken through the silence. And now the real war could begin. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Security guards were posted outside my door. A hospital social worker came to speak with Dr. Evans. My chart was updated with a bright red sticker that read, "Restricted access." The power in the room had shifted completely. I was no longer an object of pity. I was a witness. Chloe arrived in a panic. She must have heard the commotion. She burst into the room, her face pale. "What happened?" I got a text from a nurse saying there was an incident. Maria and Dr. Evans quickly explained the events of the last hour. As they spoke, Chloe's expression shifted from fear to shock, and then to a slow, burning rage. "I knew it," she seethed, her hands clenched into fists. "I knew they were snakes, both of them." She came over to my bed and took my hand. "Oh, Clara, you did it, you brilliant, brave woman. You did it." She looked at Dr. Evans. "What happens now?" "For now, we focus on Clara's health and establishing a reliable communication method," he said. "I have already put in a request for a speech therapist who specializes in augmentative communication. In the meantime, we will use the blinking system. It is slow, but it works." He pulled up a chair. "Clara, the social worker is concerned about your safety. We have barred Mark and Sarah from the hospital, but we need to understand the extent of the threat. Did they cause your accident?" This was the big question, the one that would change everything. Blink. A heavy silence fell over the room. Chloe let out a strangled gasp. Dr. Evans's face hardened. "Okay," he said, his voice grim. "This is now a criminal matter. With your permission, I need to contact the police." Blink. "Chloe," he said, turning to my friend, "can you stay with her? I do not want her to be alone." "I am not going anywhere," Chloe said, her grip on my hand tightening. Dr. Evans and Maria left to make the call. Chloe pulled her chair closer, her face level with mine. "The brakes," she whispered. It was the brakes, was not it? The tow truck driver was right. Blink. "And they did it? Mark and Sarah?" Blink. "Oh my God," she breathed, her eyes wide with horror. "They tried to murder you. And when that did not work, they tried to have you unplugged." She shook her head in disbelief. "What kind of monsters are they?" She took a deep, steadying breath. Okay. We are going to handle this. You and me. First things first, I am calling a lawyer. A real one. A shark. We are going to protect you, and we are going to destroy them." I felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it almost felt like strength. Chloe was my rock, my warrior. Two detectives arrived about an hour later. They were introduced to me as Detective Miller and Detective Sanchez. Miller was older, with a kind, tired face. Sanchez was younger, sharp, and observant. Dr. Evans explained my condition and the communication method we had established. "Ma'am, I know this is difficult," Detective Miller began, his voice respectful. "But we need to ask you some questions about what happened. Take your time. Just blink once for yes." They started with the basics, confirming my identity, my relationship with Mark and Sarah. Then they moved to the accident. "You were driving your car on the afternoon of October 12th. Is that correct?" Blink. "Your car went off the road near the old quarry. Do you remember the crash?" I did. I remembered the sickening feeling of pressing the brake pedal and feeling it go all the way to the floor. The panic. The world spinning. Blink. "We have a report from the tow truck operator who recovered your vehicle," Detective Sanchez said, her eyes fixed on me. "He noted that the brake line appeared to have been severed. Do you have any knowledge of how that might have happened?" I could not answer that with a simple yes or no. I needed to tell them who did it. Dr. Evans intervened. "Detectives, her communication is limited. Let's try to be more direct. Clara, do you believe someone intentionally cut your brake line?" Blink. "And do you know who did it?" Detective Miller asked. Blink. "Was it your husband, Mark Miller?" Blink. "Was it your sister, Sarah Jenkins?" Blink. The detectives exchanged a look. This was more than they had expected. "Did they act together?" Sanchez asked. Blink. "Okay," Miller said, taking a deep breath. "This changes things. This is no longer an accident investigation. This is an attempted murder investigation." He looked at me with a new level of seriousness. "Clara, we are going to need more than blinks to get a conviction. We need evidence. Do you know of any evidence that could prove they did this? Any conversations you overheard? Anything at all?" This was my chance. I remembered the conversation about the joint bank account. I remembered Sarah mentioning her lawyer friend, Jenna. I remembered them talking about the life insurance policy. It was a start. Dr. Evans, seeing my need for more complex communication, stepped in. "Let's try the alphabet. I will go through the letters slowly. You blink when I get to the one you want." It was a slow, painstaking process. Letter by letter, I spelled out my first word. JOINT. Then ACCOUNT. "Joint account?" Detective Miller repeated. "What about the joint account?" I spelled out MONEYGONE. Chloe, who had been listening intently, suddenly gasped. "They moved the money. I heard them talking about it. Mark and Sarah. They were worried about your assets being frozen." "When did you hear this?" Sanchez asked her sharply. "Just this morning," Chloe said. "Right here, in this room. They thought she could not hear them." The detectives looked at each other again. This was a motive. A clear financial motive. "What else, Clara?" Miller urged. I spelled out another word. LAWYER. Then JENNA. "Sarah's friend," Chloe supplied immediately. Sarah said her friend Jenna was a lawyer who was helping them with the paperwork. "We can look into that," Sanchez said, making a note. A lawyer advising them on how to proceed with ending life support could be a valuable witness, whether she knew their true motives or not. Finally, I spelled out the biggest piece of the puzzle. INSURANCE. "The life insurance policy," Detective Miller said, nodding slowly. "How much is it for?" $2 million, I heard a voice say. It was Chloe. I had told her about it years ago when I first set it up. She told me once. She wanted to make sure Mark would be okay if anything ever happened to her. The bitter irony of that statement hung heavy in the air. $2 million, Sanchez repeated, her voice grim. "That is a powerful motive for murder." The detective stayed for another hour, patiently working with me as I spelled out more details. I told them about the conversations I had overheard, the talk of selling the house, of starting a new life on the coast. Every word I spelled out was another nail in Mark and Sarah's coffin. By the time the detectives left, they had a solid case to begin building. They had a victim who was a witness. They had a motive. They had a method. And they had two clear suspects. "We are going to bring them in for questioning," Detective Miller told me before he left. "Based on your testimony, we have more than enough to hold them. We will also get a warrant to search your house and their phones and computers. If they planned this, they left a trail. And we will get a court order to examine the car again," Sanchez added. "This time with our own forensic team, not just a tow truck driver's observation." After they were gone, the room was quiet again. Chloe was sitting by my bed, her face a mixture of exhaustion and fury. "They are going to prison for a very long time, Clara," she said softly. "I am going to make sure of it." I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I had done it. I had broken the silence and set the wheels of justice in motion. But I knew this was far from over. Mark and Sarah would not go down without a fight. They would lie. They would manipulate. They would try to discredit me. They would say I was brain damaged, confused, vindictive. But they did not know the new me. The old Clara, the trusting, naive Clara, was gone. She had died on that hospital bed when she heard her husband say, "Okay." The person who was left was a survivor. And my fight was just beginning. I had won the first battle by blinking. I would win the war, one letter at a time. The speech therapist, a woman named Anita, arrived the next day with a clear plastic board covered in letters and common phrases. It was a low-tech but effective tool. She would hold it up and I would use my eyes, looking at each letter to spell out words. It was faster than waiting for someone to recite the alphabet. My world began to open up, one word at a time. My first full sentence was for Chloe. I spelled it out slowly, my eyes darting from letter to letter. THANKYOU. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. "You do not have to thank me, Clara," she said, her voice thick. "We are in this together." My parents arrived that afternoon. They had been kept away by Mark and Sarah, who had told them I was not accepting visitors and that it was too stressful. Chloe had called them and told them to come immediately. Seeing their faces, etched with worry and confusion, was heartbreaking. My mother burst into tears the moment she saw me. My father, a stoic man, just stood there, his face pale, his hands trembling. "Oh, my baby." My mother sobbed, rushing to my bedside. "What have they done to you?" It was Chloe who had to explain everything. She did it gently but firmly, outlining Mark and Sarah's betrayal, the cut brake line, the attempt to pull the plug. With each word, my parents' faces shifted from grief to horror, and then to a cold, hard fury. "My own daughter," my mother whispered, her voice shaking with rage as she looked at me. "Sarah did this? Your sister?" I looked at her and spelled out a single word on the board with my eyes. YES. My father, who had been silent until now, spoke. His voice was low and dangerous. "Where are they?" he asked. "The police have them," Chloe said. "They are being questioned." "Good," my father said. The word was like a chip of ice. "When they get out, they will have to deal with me." Having my parents there was another layer of armor. Mark and Sarah had not just betrayed me, they had betrayed our entire family. Sarah, especially. She was my mother's daughter. The thought of what this was doing to my mother was a separate kind of pain. Later, Detective Miller returned. He had news. "We got the warrants," he said, standing at the foot of my bed. "We searched the house, and we found some things you should know about." I waited, my eyes fixed on his face. "First, the finances. Your husband had been systematically draining your joint accounts for months. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers. The last one, for over $50,000, was the morning you were brought here. So it had been going on for longer than I thought. The betrayal ran deeper. Second, we recovered their phones and laptops," he continued. They tried to delete everything, but our tech guys are good. We found the texts, hundreds of them, between your husband and your sister. He paused, his expression grim. They were having an affair, Clara. It looks like it has been going on for at least a year. They talked about you. They called you their obstacle. They talked about the insurance money and the life they were going to have once you were out of the picture. Even though I had known it, hearing the words out of the picture sent a chill through me. It was so cold, so callous. I was not a person to them. I was a roadblock. And then we found this, he said. He held up a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small, dark object. We found it in the back of your sister's car, tucked under the spare tire. It is a pair of wire cutters. There are microscopic traces of hydraulic fluid on the blades, consistent with brake fluid. We are sending it to the lab for a full analysis. But the preliminary match is strong. The smoking gun. Or in this case, the smoking wire cutters. And there is more, he said, his voice dropping. On your husband's laptop, we found his search history. The week before your accident, he searched for how to make a car crash look like an accident, cutting brake lines undetected, and fastest acting poisons. Poisons. The thought was sickening. If the car crash had not worked, they had a backup plan. They had been thorough. We have enough, Detective Miller said, his voice firm. We have more than enough. The district attorney is filing charges this afternoon. Attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and several counts of financial fraud. They are not getting bail. It was happening. It was real. The weight of their betrayal was being met with the weight of the law. The news spread like wildfire. Chloe's lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Jessica, came to see me. She explained the legal process. I would be the star witness. My testimony, spelled out letter by letter, would be the foundation of the case against them. They are going to try to discredit you, Jessica warned me. Their defense will be that you are brain damaged, that you are confused, suggestible, that Chloe and your parents are feeding you these ideas. We need to prove, beyond any doubt, that your mind is 100% intact. To do that, we began a series of evaluations. Neurologists, psychiatrists, and specialists all came to assess me. They asked me questions about my past, my childhood, my job, my wedding day. I answered them all, one painstaking letter at a time. I spelled out my mother's maiden name. I named my first pet. I described the dress I wore to my high school prom. With every correct answer, I was building a fortress around my credibility. I was proving to the world that the only thing broken was my body. My mind was a steel trap. The media got wind of the story. They called me the blinking witness. My case became a local sensation. Wife wakes from coma to accuse husband and sister of murder plot. The headlines were lurid and sensational, but they served a purpose. They painted a picture of Mark and Sarah as the monsters they were. There would be no public sympathy for them. One afternoon, Chloe was reading me some of the news articles online. One of them had a picture of Mark and Sarah being led into the courthouse for their arraignment. They were in handcuffs. Mark looked broken, his face buried in his hands. Sarah, however, was staring straight at the camera. Her face was not sad or scared. It was defiant. It was filled with hate. And it was directed at me. Even in a blurry news photo, her message was clear. This was not over. I pointed my eyes to the alphabet board. Lethertry. I spelled out for Chloe. Chloe looked at the words, then back at me. A slow, fierce smile spread across her face. That is the spirit, she said. Let them try. They have no idea who they are dealing with. The weeks turned into a month, then 2. My days fell into a new rhythm. Physical therapy in the morning, where I worked on regaining tiny movements, a twitch in my thumb, a slight turn of my head. Every small victory was a monumental achievement. Afternoons were for legal strategy with Jessica and interviews with the prosecutors. Evenings were for my family and Chloe, who surrounded me with a shield of love and support. I learned more about the depth of Mark and Sarah's deception. The police uncovered a secret credit card Mark had opened in my name, racking up thousands of dollars in debt on gifts for Sarah, trips they took together while I thought he was on business, and expensive dinners. They had been living a double life, funded by me. Sarah, it turned out, was in deep financial trouble. She had lost her job months before the accident, something she had hidden from everyone, including our parents. She was drowning in debt and saw my insurance money as her only way out. She had been the driving force, the one who pushed Mark, preying on his weakness and their illicit affair to turn him into her accomplice. My father took the news about Sarah the hardest. "I do not have a daughter anymore," he said one evening, his voice heavy. "The person who did this is a stranger to me." My mother, on the other hand, channeled her grief into action. She became a fierce advocate for me, a lioness protecting her cub. She dealt with the hospital administration. She screened calls. She made sure I had everything I needed. Her love was a tangible force in the room. One day, Jessica came with an update. "They have been offered a plea deal," she said. "If they plead guilty, they will get a lesser sentence. 25 years instead of a potential life sentence if they go to trial and lose." "Will they take it?" Chloe asked. "Mark's lawyer is strongly advising him to," Jessica said. "The evidence against him is overwhelming. The search history alone is damning." "And Sarah?" I spelled out on the board. Jessica's expression tightened. "Sarah is a different story. She is refusing. She is sticking to her story. That you were suicidal. That you cut your own brake line and that she and Mark were just trying to honor your wishes by letting you go." The audacity of it was stunning. To twist my own will to live into a lie about me wanting to die. "She is trying to paint you as unstable," Jessica continued, "and she is trying to paint Mark as her victim. That he was just a grieving husband, manipulated by you and your depression." "That will never work," Chloe scoffed. "Nobody who knows Clara would ever believe that." "We know that," Jessica said, "but a jury does not know her. They will only know what they are told in court. Sarah is banking on her ability to lie more convincingly than we can tell the truth." She looked at me. "This means we are going to trial, Clara. It is going to be public and it is going to be ugly. Are you ready for that?" I did not even have to think about it. For months, I had been silent, a prisoner. Now, I had a voice. And I was going to use it. Y-E-S, I spelled out. I am ready. I would face my sister in court. I would look her in the eye. And I would tell the world exactly what she did. There would be no more hiding. There would be no more lies. There would only be the truth, delivered one blink at a time. The run-up to the trial was intense. My life became a series of depositions and psychiatric evaluations, all designed to build an unshakable mountain of proof that I was of sound mind. Jessica was relentless. She had me recount details from my entire life, cross-referencing them with family photos, journals, and Chloe's memories. We were building a case not just for the prosecution, but for the very legitimacy of my consciousness. Mark, as predicted, took the plea deal. His sentencing was scheduled for after Sarah's trial, as he had agreed to testify against her in exchange for the reduced sentence of 25 years. The news hit me in a strange way. There was no joy, just a grim sense of finality. The man I had loved, the life we had built, it was all gone, reduced to a docket number and a prison term. I felt a pang of something. A ghost of the love I once had for him, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of him saying, "Okay," to my murder. Sarah, however, dug in her heels. Her defense attorney, a slick, expensive-looking man named Mr. Davenport, began to wage a war in the press. He gave interviews painting Sarah as the devoted, heartbroken sister, and me as a tragic but deeply unstable woman. He leaked excerpts from my old journals, cherry-picking entries from years ago where I had written about feeling sad or stressed, twisting them into a narrative of long-term depression. "This is a family tragedy," he said in one television interview, his face a mask of sorrow. "My client's only crime was loving her sister too much. She saw her sister's pain, and in a moment of profound grief, She agreed with a desperate husband to let her go peacefully. The rest of this is a fantasy, constructed by a damaged mind and fueled by a manipulative best friend. Chloe was incandescent with rage when she saw it. Manipulative? I will show him manipulative, she fumed. Let him talk, Jessica advised calmly during one of our strategy sessions. He is showing us his whole playbook. He is going to attack your credibility, Clara. He is going to attack Chloe. He is going to try to make the jury feel sorry for Sarah. We will be ready for it. My physical therapy was progressing, albeit slowly. I had regained some control over my neck muscles, allowing me to turn my head slightly from side to side. I could also make a definite, though weak, grip with my left hand. Every new movement was a victory, a piece of myself I was reclaiming. We incorporated these new abilities into my communication. A head turn for no was faster than doing nothing. A hand squeeze for Chloe or my mother became a silent language of reassurance. The day the trial began, I was transported to the courthouse in a specialized ambulance. The logistics were complex. I would testify from a hospital bed set up in the courtroom with Maria and a team of medical staff on hand. The media presence was a circus. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. I just stared straight ahead, my face as still and impassive as I could make it. I would save my expression for the jury. The courtroom was packed. I saw my parents and Chloe in the front row, their faces grim and determined. Across the aisle, I saw Sarah's supporters, a few distant relatives I barely knew, and some of her friends, all looking at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. And then I saw her. Sarah was sitting at the defense table next to Mr. Davenport. She was dressed in a conservative gray suit, her hair pulled back neatly. She looked smaller than I remembered, and she was the very picture of quiet, dignified grief. When her eyes met mine, however, there was no grief. There was only cold, hard loathing. She held my gaze for a moment, a silent challenge, before turning away to whisper something to her lawyer. The first few days of the trial were a blur of legal arguments and witness testimony. The prosecution, led by a sharp district attorney named Ms. Chen, methodically built her case. The tow truck driver testified about the cleanly cut brake line. The forensic expert presented the wire cutters found in Sarah's car, confirming the presence of my car's brake fluid. The banking expert detailed the systematic draining of my accounts. Then, Mark took the stand. Seeing him in a prison jumpsuit was jarring. He looked gaunt and defeated. He avoided looking at me. In a low, monotone voice, he recounted the entire plot. He told the jury about the affair with Sarah, how she had been the one to first suggest getting rid of me, how they had planned the accident together. He admitted to his internet searches, to his role in the cover-up. Why did you do it? Ms. Chen asked him. Mark finally looked up, his eyes filled with a pathetic self-pity. I was weak, he said. Sarah, she convinced me it was the only way. We were in debt. She made it sound so easy. She said Clara would be better off, that we would be better off. During the cross-examination, Mr. Davenport tried to paint Mark as an unreliable witness, a liar trying to save his own skin by throwing his lover under the bus. So you are asking this jury to believe that you, a grown man, were just a puppet, and Miss Jenkins was the puppet master? Davenport asked sarcastically. Yes, Mark said, his voice barely a whisper. That is exactly what it was. He was not entirely lying. Sarah had been the driving force, but he was no puppet. He was a willing participant. His weakness was not an excuse. It was a choice. Finally, it was my turn to testify. The courtroom was silent as my bed was wheeled to the front. Anita stood beside me with the alphabet board. Ms. Chen approached me, her expression gentle. Clara, thank you for being here, she began. I know this is incredibly difficult. I am going to ask you some questions. Please take all the time you need to answer. For the next 6 hours, spread over 2 days, I told my story. Letter by letter, word by word. I told them about lying in that hospital bed, hearing my sister and my husband plot my death. I spelled out Sarah's exact words. PULLTHEPLUG. I described the moment Mark agreed. OKAY. I told them about their conversations, their plans for my money, their utter lack of remorse. With every word, I could feel the atmosphere in the courtroom shifting. The jury was captivated. They leaned forward, their eyes fixed on the alphabet board, watching my story unfold. I was no longer the blinking witness. I was Clara, a woman who had survived the ultimate betrayal and was now speaking her truth. Then it was Mr. Davenport's turn. He approached me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. It was a predator's smile. "Good afternoon, Clara," he said, his voice oozing false sympathy. "You have been through a terrible ordeal, a terrible, tragic accident." He started slowly, asking me about my life before the crash. He brought up the journal entries, reading my own words about stress and sadness back to me. "You wrote here, 'Sometimes I feel like I am drowning.' That sounds like a cry for help, does it not?" he asked. I turned my head to the side. "No." "No?" he said, feigning surprise. "It sounds quite desperate to me. Is it not possible, Clara, that you were so unhappy you decided to end your own life?" I stared at him, then at the jury. I wanted them to see the absurdity of his question. I spelled out my answer. ILOVEDMYLIFE. Davenport's smile faltered for a second. He pressed on, trying to poke holes in my memory, suggesting that the trauma and the drugs had clouded my mind. "Is it not possible that you misheard them?" he asked. "That in your confused state you misinterpreted a conversation born of grief and desperation?" I spelled out my reply without hesitation. IHEARDEVERYWORD. He then turned his attack to Chloe. "Your friend, Chloe? She has been with you every day, has she not? Talking to you, feeding you information. Is it not possible that she planted these ideas in your head? That she has a grudge against your sister and your husband?" This was the moment I had been waiting for. My anger, which I had kept tightly coiled inside me, finally had an outlet. I looked at Chloe, who was glaring at Davenport with pure hatred. Then I looked back at the jury. My eyes moved across the board with a speed and precision that surprised even me. CHLOESAVEDMYLIFEESARAHTRIEDTOENDIT. A murmur went through the courtroom. Davenport's face flushed. He had overplayed his hand. He had tried to turn my hero into a villain, and I had turned it right back on him. He had one last card to play. He walked over to the defense table and put a hand on Sarah's shoulder. She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with perfectly timed tears. "Clara," he said, his voice soft and pleading. "Look at your sister. Look at this poor, devastated woman. Do you really want this jury to believe that she, your own flesh and blood, is a monster capable of murder?" I looked at Sarah. I saw the fake tears. I saw the calculated performance. And behind it all, I saw the cold, empty truth of who she was. I held her gaze. The mask of the grieving sister fell away, and for a split second I saw the same defiant hatred I had seen in the newspaper photo. I turned my eyes back to the board. My answer was simple. It was final. It was the truth. YES. The closing arguments were a formality. Ms. Chen methodically laid out the mountain of evidence, culminating in my testimony. "The evidence in this case is overwhelming," she concluded, her voice ringing with conviction. "But the most powerful evidence is not the wire cutters or the bank statements. It is Clara. It is her will to live. It is her courage to speak. Sarah Jenkins did not just try to kill her sister. She tried to silence her. Do not let her succeed. Find her guilty." Mr. Davenport's closing was full of bluster and melodrama. He painted a picture of a family torn apart by tragedy, of a grief-stricken sister being railroaded by a vindictive prosecution. He called my testimony the ramblings of a damaged mind, but his words sounded hollow. We had taken away all his power. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. The speed of their decision was a verdict in itself. We all stood, or in my case, lay, as the jury filed back in. The foreman, a middle-aged woman with a stern face, handed a piece of paper to the bailiff. My heart was pounding. This was it. The culmination of months of fighting, of struggling, of holding on. The judge read the verdict. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we, the jury, find the defendant, Sarah Jenkins. He paused. Guilty. A collective gasp went through the room. My mother and Chloe grabbed my hand, squeezing it hard. On the charge of attempted murder, we, the jury, find the defendant. The world seemed to slow down. I looked at Sarah. Her face was a blank mask of shock. The performance was over. Guilty. The mask crumbled. A strangled animal sound escaped her lips. Her face contorted into a snarl of pure, undiluted rage. No, she screamed, lunging forward before being restrained by 2 bailiffs. No, she is lying. The witch is lying. She fought against the bailiffs, her eyes wild, still screaming at me. You did this. You ruined my life. I did not ruin your life, Sarah. I thought, as they dragged her, kicking and screaming from the courtroom. You did. You made your choices, and I just survived them. I lay back against the pillows, the adrenaline draining out of me, leaving me weak but profoundly, deeply relieved. It was over. We had won. Justice had been served. The sentencing was a few weeks later. Mark, for his testimony, received the agreed-upon 25 years. He would be an old man before he was free. Sarah, because she had shown no remorse and had forced a trial, was given the maximum sentence. Life in prison, with no possibility of parole for 40 years. I was there for her sentencing. I watched as the judge told her she was a cancer on her own family and a person of profound moral depravity. Sarah just stared ahead, her face cold and empty. She did not look at me once. After it was all over, I returned to the hospital, but not for long. My recovery began to accelerate. The victory in court had unlocked something in me. My will to heal became as strong as my will to survive had been. The twitches became movements. The movements became actions. With grueling daily physical therapy, I slowly began to reclaim my body. I learned to sit up in a wheelchair. I learned to feed myself again. And one day, 6 months after the trial, I spoke my first word aloud. It was not a dramatic word. It was not a profound word. It was just a simple sound, pushed past lips that had been still for so long. I was in a therapy session with Anita, and she was holding up a glass of water. Water, I rasped. The sound was hoarse, scratchy, and weak, but it was mine. It was my voice. Anita and I both burst into tears. From that day on, my progress was steady. I moved from the hospital to a rehabilitation center. My voice grew stronger. I took my first steps with a walker. Every day was a battle, but it was a battle I was winning. I divorced Mark, of course. Jessica handled everything. I took back my maiden name. I sold the house that was tainted with their betrayal and bought a small, sunny apartment near Chloe. My parents helped me set it up. It was my sanctuary, a place of peace and new beginnings. The insurance money, the $2 million that they had tried to kill me for, was eventually paid out to me. Not because of my death, but because of my permanent disability. The irony was not lost on me. It became the fund for my future, paying for my care, my home, my new life. The life they had tried to steal from me. I never saw Sarah or Mark again. I received a letter from Mark once, a rambling, self-pitying apology from prison. I threw it away without reading it all. From Sarah, there was only silence. I heard through the family grapevine that she was a model prisoner, quiet and compliant. It did not surprise me. She was a performer. She was just playing a new role. My life is not the one I planned. I walk with a cane. My left side is still weak. My voice will always be a little raspy. There are scars, both visible and invisible, that will never fully fade. But I am alive. I am free. And I am happy. I have Chloe and my parents. I have my sunny apartment. I have started writing again, this time on a specially adapted computer. I am telling my story, in my own words. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment in the hospital. I think about Sarah's cold voice saying, "Pull the plug." I think about Mark's quiet, "Okay." I remember the terror, the helplessness, the rage. But then I remember the blink, that one tiny movement. The first shot in a war I was never supposed to survive. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could make me a footnote in their own story. But they were wrong. They did not erase me. They forged me. In the fire of their betrayal, they created someone stronger than they could ever imagine. They wanted to make me small and silent, but they only made my voice and my will to live louder than ever.